I'm just going to make a few brief comments on foreign policy as it relates to industry. And the reason is that after 35 years as a career diplomat, I went into the private sector, into industry, and work in a very diverse industrial group that covers innovation, R&D, manufacturing, services, and trade. So it covers quite a number of industrial areas. Paramount Group, which is our defense and aerospace group, it is the largest privately owned group in Africa. We're very much involved, defense and aerospace group in Africa, very much involved in peacekeeping operations throughout the continent and providing African countries with the capacity to bring about the peace and stability that Ambassador Lindiwe was talking about. Also involved in very large agro-business projects in a number of countries in Africa. These are big projects. These are tens of millions of dollars. They're not small things. And they all come from the private sector. And all of this fits in very neatly into what Ambassador Lindiwe was talking about in terms of our commitment to Africa and growing the continent. Apart from that, we are a global group, so we have manufacturing facilities all over the world. As a private group, we cannot be only South African. It is simply too small a market, and the state has its own defense company in the form of Denel. The first thing to say about that is that the South African government has done extraordinarily good work in opening up the South African economy to the rest of the world. And its commitment to Africa, the government's commitment to regional economic integration in Africa, to the African agenda, to the Millennium Development Goals, and the role that the government has played in the World Trade Organization with the Doha Development Round, the role our various finance ministers have played in the World Bank, the IMF, and presidents have played in bringing the African agenda to the top of the agenda of the G8. All of these things have opened up the world to South African industry and have created the opportunities for the private sector to take the ball and run with it. So from that perspective, and also signing many trade agreements and many other arrangements, so the ball now is very much in the court of the private sector to take this and do something with it. But insofar as there are limitations and constraints, they do not have to do with foreign policy. They have more to do with our domestic situation. And in the nature of the case, what we have to bear a couple of fundamentals in mind. And one is that we are a trading nation. We earn something like 60% of our GDP from our economic interaction with the rest of the world. Last time I looked, it was about 60%. It might have changed, but it's something of that order. So we owe an enormous amount of our nation's prosperity to the fact that we trade with the rest of the world. We can't just close our borders and operate internally. The second point is that given the situation that we have, with enormous inequality, enormous poverty, enormous unemployment, we as a nation simply do not have the capacity to generate the investment required in our own economy. We cannot do it on the scale, anywhere near the scale that is required. So we do depend on foreign direct investment. That is a critical point for us. And we receive a lot of foreign investment, but much of it is portfolio investment. It's the kind of investment that comes into the stock exchange one day and goes out the next. In terms of fixed investment, that is building factories, creating jobs, manufacturing things, exporting them. On that point, we're not doing particularly well. And it's very marked if you look at the last commodities boom from, say, 2001 to 2008, something like that. South Africa lost out on an enormous amount of foreign fixed investment partly because of our infrastructure. A lot of that investment went to Canada, it went to Australia, it went to Chile, it went to many other countries. Not much of it came here. And there were a couple of reasons for that. One was we had our infrastructure. I mentioned our electricity was a problem. Our ports were a problem. Our ground transport was a bit of a problem. And then also you will often hear foreign industrialists saying that they find there's some domestic policy confusion in South Africa with regard to FDI. They can't make out exactly what the policy is. And so some of this might be unfair. It might not be correct, but that is the perception that we were talking a little bit earlier about perception. And it does create for us, and we come across this every day in our own business, it does create a bit of a problem. And sometimes the criticism that is leveled at the policy framework is not entirely without justification. We should be honest among ourselves and admit this to ourselves. One classic example, I can give it to you right now. The government has its own industrial development program. It's called IPAP 2. We have an interest in it because it speaks a lot about the defense industry. And defense industry is not only about guns and bombs. It is probably the most advanced industry there is in most countries. There's probably no country that I'm aware of that has moved from developing country to developed without having a substantial defense industry as it's part of its industrial base. And still today, countries that traditionally are neutral or regarded as neutral, like Switzerland or Finland, they have large defense industries relative to the size of their economies, because so many things come out of the defense industry. Everyday things, the GPS in your car, nuclear medicine, stainless steel. I mean, there are many things that we use and take for granted in our everyday lives, but they are products of the defense industry. And in IPAP 2, the government felt that we needed to rebuild the defense industry in this country. Also the special materials industry, which we do very much in our aviation business. Our aviation company here manufactures more than 1 million components a year for Airbus and Boeing, for the Typhoon Eurofighter and for the Mirage F1 supersonic fighter jets. We do it here in Centurion. And we have some of the world's most advanced patents on thermoplastics and composite materials that are used more and more in aircraft manufacture and in titanium and other materials of this nature. This is in IPAP 2. And this is a very important document. We looked at this and said, this is a very, very serious attempt on the part of government to develop the defense industry as part of the broader defense program, or rather industrial development program. But now you would also have seen that there's been a defense review, a strategic defense review. There's been a review committee writing a new defense review, the first one in 12 or 13 years. And they have, in that defense review, they have one chapter on the industry. Now, if you can reconcile IPAP 2, the government's own industrial development policy, with the defense industry's own strategic review report, if you can reconcile those two, I'll give you my telephone number and please call me and explain to me how we're going to be able to do that. And I don't mean this in an unkind way, but I can tell you now that I don't think that review committee even read IPAP 2, because there's no evidence to suggest that they did. And so when a foreign industrialist says to you, or to us, that there's a policy problem there, they don't understand exactly what the South African government wants, then I think we should be honest enough with ourselves to say that this really is an issue. And it's not very easy As Ambassador Lindiwe was saying, we are a new democracy. We have lots of growing pains here and there. We as a group have great understanding for that and supportive of it, and we still have some way to go. But to come back to the original point, and the point that I was asked to address, the role of foreign policy on industry, I think on a scale of 1 to 10, you would have to give the government pretty much a 10 on what foreign policy has done to open industry for this country.